Hey guys, and welcome back to Her Revision Podcast, a podcast for women who are rewriting the stories that they told themselves and that the world tells them. And today is episode 2 of the podcast, second season. I wanted to get into something we all do. If I may say so myself, I think this is such a human thing to do, but it can be so detrimental if you don't realize that you're doing it. So we're going to talk about how to stop catastrophizing. So let's rewind a little bit, right? When I first started therapy, I've been in therapy. Yeah, y'all, I've probably been in therapy for altogether, probably the last, say 6 years of my life. I think that I have been to therapy. I've went to a few different therapists for many reasons, whether I didn't feel connected or I moved and they didn't practice in the area that I moved in. And now my current therapist, I feel like I found my person. This is my girl. I feel like I'm and even with all the stuff that's going on in my life right now, I just feel so whole. So just shameless plug on therapy and how it works and how great it is for the soul. Anyways, continuing on with what I was going to say, this episode will be about how to stop catastrophizing. So when I first started this therapist and this journey with her, she noticed very early on that I did this thing that was, as she labeled it, catastrophizing, which by definition, because I wrote it down, catastrophizing is the tendency to imagine the worst case scenario and let it consume our thoughts. I was so good in thinking of the worst case scenario often. And I think that it was rooted in, I won't even say how I was raised, but I guess I will say in how I was raised and where it felt like everything was much more of like coming from how did I say it? I feel like it was coming from a place where I had to survive, right? And within survival, within feeling like you got to make do with what you got and you got to make ends meet by any means necessary, I always looked at life from if it could get any worse, what am I going to do about it? Because I can't hit rock bottom. So what am I going to do about it? That is always how I viewed life. I've always viewed it from a perspective of I can't afford myself the opportunity to not see or have a plan for what's coming. So if it is going to be the worst, what can I do about it? I have to put myself in the mindset that I have to fix it if it's going to be the worst of the worst that could happen. And I didn't realize at the time how it was so embedded in me and so detrimental. I feel like, my thought process and how I moved in the future, how I pursued things, how I made decisions, how I operated out of my relationships. I did so much catastrophizing. It was crazy. So for example, for me, when I think of catastrophizing, right, it's always like a black and white thinking. There is no gray area. Everything is either one extreme or the other. It's either yes or no. There is no maybe. There's never a maybe because I don't know how to exist in maybe. That is how I was living. That is how I based all of my thought processes off of I need a definitive. Or if I felt like somebody was upset with me, that automatically meant they didn't want anything to do with me. They never wanted to talk to me again. If I felt like I didn't get this job, that means I will never be successful. I'm going to be a bum. There's nothing like it's to the point where you tend to exaggerate potential negative outcomes where everything that could possibly go quote unquote wrong or not exactly how you imagined it will be the worst of the worst. And the impact on my mental health was so crazy. I found myself always feeling like I was holding on to like the heaviness of the unknown because I looked for the worst case scenario in everything, because I catastrophized all the situations that I wasn't aware of the outcome of. I did not know, so therefore I thought that it could only be the worst. It messed with me a lot because I think that, one, it turned me into a people pleaser. It had me feeling as though in order for my mind to not think the worst or for me to not go so left thinking that I had to always consistently make sure that I made it right or that my relationships are good or that my every action that I made was damn near perfect. I had to make sure that I didn't let go of this perception of making things right or being perfect. I had to maintain that. And it was such a negative impact on my mental health because it is unrealistic. It is unrealistic for you to always make sure that every situation will go right. It's unrealistic for you to think that every relationship is black and white. It's unrealistic to live in the fear that the unknown will always produce negative outcomes. This black and white thinking, feeling that I had, always had me feeling like in life, it was like I lived my life in an all or nothing sort of view. It had me missing out on opportunities, I feel like, because this thought process of worst case scenario hindered my problem solving. It didn't allow me to rationally think about other options or ways that I could fix something or work through something. It didn't allow that because I was always increasing my stress. I was always coming to conclusions based off of this warped perception of what I thought was going to go wrong. And I remember, and I'll be a little bit more vulnerable in speaking of specific occasion for me. I remember when I ended up having a bad ending, so to speak, with the guy I was dating. And it put me in a place where I felt like my worth was being questioned by myself. I was questioning my worth. I was questioning whether or not what I had to offer was enough. If based on how we ended, if this was in any way an indication of future relationships or life partnerships that I would have. So within that moment of catastrophizing, it went from this was a bad breakup to I'll never find love. It went from our arguments centered around communication went to me catastrophizing that maybe this means that I'm too clingy. Like maybe my need for everything was a worst case scenario. My need for the thought process that I had surrounding this relationship was like, well, if this didn't work out and maybe I didn't try hard enough, that means that how will I ever find anybody that I can try hard, that'll be willing? Like everything was like extreme left, extreme, it'll never happen. Don't think about it. It's not for you. Erase it from out your memory. Like everything was so absolutely not. Like that the thought process that I had in my mind was the answer to the thoughts that I had was so negative. It was so negative. And my therapist, I remember, had to tell me, and she was like, one of the things that she realized about me is that I constantly lived in this state of worry or lack. And a couple of things. It was an indication of my view on myself. But it was also, and within that, I say that I was never comfortable because of this idea of me catastrophizing, because of the way that I reached certain conclusions and the negative impact that it had on me in you know, my problem solving. I realized that I was never really comfortable in my decision making. I catastrophized because I was never comfortable enough in my decision making to say that I'm making the best decision for me, and this doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most horrible decision. It doesn't mean that everybody was going to hate me. It just means that this is the best decision for me, and this is what I'm going to stand on. I was never comfortable in that. So because I wasn't comfortable in that, it made me go from one extreme to the next, because in my mind, the only rational thought process that I had was either I'm making a good decision or I'm making a bad one. Either somebody likes me or they won't. It was always like that for me. And I realized that deep down inside meant that I really needed to reevaluate my perception of how I viewed myself and how sure I was in the decisions that I decided to make. Because somewhere along that line, I feel like I was battling between me not thinking that I was capable of coming up with the decisions that wouldn't lead to my detriment. You know what I'm saying? So that was one of the things that it showed me. It also showed me that people pleasing, like I mentioned before, was very prominent. It showed me that I catastrophized because I wanted to be so accepted. I didn't want anybody to not like me. So when I felt like it was leaning towards somebody being unhappy with me or didn't like a decision that I made, it instantly made me feel like, oh, they must hate me. They never want to see me again. I've ruined this. Like that catastrophizing did that to me. It allowed me to go from 0 to 100 real quick. There was no in between for me. But also my therapist allowed me to realize that when it came to me catastrophizing, I had to get real with myself. And I had to learn how to break the cycle. How do you break the cycle of going from immediately having an either or type of lifestyle mentality to thinking better. In my mind, how I'm gonna do that? Like, that's in me. I feel like, and that's when I start to beat myself up. Now it's like, okay, I'll never learn. You see how easy it is to catastrophize? You decide you want to do something, and because you have that inkling of self-doubt or in yourself and your ability to choose a wise decision, I immediately went to, I won't be able to do this. There's no way I can do this. I've been doing this all my whole life. I've been catastrophizing my whole life. I've realized now that it was catastrophizing. How am I going to do this? I can't undo this. And within that, I was like, dang, I'm catastrophizing already. You see how easy it is for you to just think the absolute worst about the decisions that you make in your life without you even realizing it, without you even realizing that that's what you do, that's how you are. I feel like I've said this before, but the first step for me was realizing that that's what I was doing, because it made me hyper aware of it every time. And going to therapy allowed me to realize I was doing it more frequently because she would point it out. But also when I was not in my therapy sessions, my inner voice would be able to tell me like, okay, Jazz, pump the brakes. Like it, and that's why therapy is so important to me, because it allowed me to see that. It allowed me to hear myself. I could hear myself. I was becoming more confident in that voice that I was so unsure of, that I was so wishy-washy of when it came to my decision making. I was becoming sure in that. So not only was I identifying that I was catastrophizing, but I was doing less and less of it because I was finding my inner voice. How to break the cycle, right? How to break the cycle of catastrophizing, how to break the cycle of finding the worst case scenario all the time, how to break the cycle of looking at life from a white or black mentality. The first step for me was to challenge the catastrophic thought. Look at the evidence, question it. Question every thought that you think that could lead you to far left, question it. And then identify an alternate outcome. For example, I'll just use the relationship that I was talking about earlier. I'll use that for example. In my mind, because of the way that it did not work out with this past relationship, my immediate catastrophic thought was, I'll never find love. I don't think that I will, because not even just this relationship, prior to those relationships, it just didn't work out. I just don't know. Like, this point isn't me. It gotta be me. There's something in me that just is not allowing these relationships to work. I'll never find love. I'm probably gonna die alone. I probably need a cat or two, and I'm allergic to cats, so I can't get catastrophic thoughts, right? Review that. Let's question the evidence real quick though. I know that in my heart of hearts, the person that I am, the woman that I'm becoming, I am so proud of her. I'm proud of her, of all the accomplishments she's made. I'm proud of the type of personality that she has. I'm proud of how kind she is, how good her soul is, her spirit. I'm proud of who she is. And I know that everyone that I have spoken to, whether romantically or platonically, I know that I speak life into them. I'm confident in that as a person, as who I am, my entity, the makeup of Jasmine. I know that I have so much to offer. And I don't know, call it cocky, confident, whatever you want to call it. I am so proud of that. I am so proud of the person that I am. And I think back on all the good moments that I've had with people prior to the end of a relationship, whatever the case. When it was good, it was good. And take the person out of it, when those good moments and what I had to offer was made evident within that relationship, it felt good. And I know that I'm capable of it. So I had to question the evidence that because this specific relationship ended, or this didn't work out, or things didn't happen in the way that I thought it was, or somebody feels this way about me, but that means that I will never be capable of it. No. Not based off of who I am. Like, it could never be that. God would never let it be that. I just know he won't, right? And let's consider alternative outcomes. Maybe that relationship didn't work out, and it does feel bad. And it does make me sad because something ended and it makes you question yourself. But instead of thinking that it'll never happen again, that maybe it's not meant for you, that you'll never find love, let's consider that that relationship was not meant for you. And you're one step closer to finding the person that you're meant to find, the person that you're meant to be with. You're one step closer. It had to end. It literally, there would be no way for the person that God has meant for you to find you without that relationship ended. So you had to go through that. That had to happen. Thank you. No, I'm joking. But it had to happen. My alternate outcome, my alternate thought process is, if that didn't end, my actual, what is for me, what is to come for me, won't be able to come into fruition. It just won't be able to bloom. So whenever that happens, I'll be ready because I have a fresh start. I have more room to cultivate the person and the woman that I'll be for my person. But I cannot be that at all until that ends. So thank you. It was meant. It happened. I learned so much. The person that I am, the person that I transitioned from, whatever the case may be, I've learned so much from her. Because of that relationship, whether good or bad, I've learned so much, and I'm carrying that into my person's world, whoever that person is, right? That's my alternate outcome. And apply that to whatever, whether that be a job or not. Maybe you didn't get the dream job that you want, but the alternate outcome is that doesn't mean that you're not going to find your dream job. Maybe that means that specific place, that specific position, that specific career choice was not it for you. Although you thought it was, although you thought this was your end all be all, maybe God has another dream for you. Maybe he has another career choice for you. Maybe he has another company he wants you to work for that's going to be better and bigger than the previous. You just don't know, but don't think that it means that you're inadequate. Sometimes the circumstances are just not right. Sometimes there's so much more to learn. Sometimes you may just not be prepared, and it may crush you if you think that you're ready for it now and you get it. It may crush you because you're not ready yet. There's so many other thought processes to think than your inadequacy. Because, baby, I promise you, if you're working on yourself and you're doing all that you need to do to better you, it's not you that's inadequate. The other thing that I do to break the cycle of catastrophizing is I practice mindfulness and grounding techniques. I center myself on living in the present moment, right? So many times we catastrophize because we think too far in advance. We try to predict the future. We try to plan ahead for what could possibly happen, what decision I could possibly make, how somebody could possibly perceive me. We do too much thinking and focusing on the then when we're not even there yet. You can only worry about now. I can't even see tomorrow. I can see today. I can change today. I can make today as beautiful and as bountiful and plentiful as I can. But by me worrying about tomorrow, today will become yesterday and nothing would have happened. You get what I'm saying? I'm worrying about the next steps when this step is what I need to prepare me. They say that success is when preparation meets opportunity, right? I have opportunity in the present. Yeah. So if today is my present and the key to my future is success, I got to make the opportunity of today count. I got to work on everything that I can in the now. I'm not even going to get there if I don't focus on the now. You have to think and live in the present moment. You have to practice mindfulness. The third thing that I did, which is much more of like a mental thing and something that you will actively have to work on, but it's not necessarily tangible, is you have to develop a growth mindset. You have to be able to look at life from a learning perspective, from a learning opportunity every time. And it does sound easier than it is to do, but I've actively been trying to get into the mindset that everything that I perceive may not go in the direction that I wanted to, or when I start to think that I might have opportunity here, or somebody might not be happy with me, or whatever the case may be, when I start to feel those feelings and I know that normally I would immediately go left thinking, I put myself in the perspective to always look at it like an opportunity. So maybe a relationship did end and it hurt really bad and it made me feel some type of way. Instead of immediately thinking the worst of myself or immediately going to the lowest of the low that person thought of me, I think of it as, okay, from that situation, from that thing that occurred, what can I learn about myself and what am I able to take away from that to make better of another similar situation I might find myself in the future? You have to be ready to be on your toes, to think of an alternate decision of what it could have looked like or of what you could do better, you could learn from. You always have to look at it from that. It is so easy for you to immediately go negative. The older I got, the more I realized that I've been so conditioned to always think the worst, to always have to try to come to conclusions and make shit shake, because I've always thought of life and thought of decisions that I've made and outcomes from a lack sort of standpoint. And I told myself, especially me reaching 30. Like, I'm done with that. I'm done with catastrophizing and thinking of the worst in every situation, because at the end of the day, the only person that it really dismantles as far as, thought process and how you feel about yourself is you. Like, that you're the only person that will be negatively impacted. Well, no. I take that back. Let's rewind. I'm not even gonna cut this part out, because in thought, I just thought, and I don't think that was a catastrophic thought, but an alternate outcome would be that you're not the only one that catastrophizing your thought processes can negatively impact. You catastrophizing your thought processes, learn how to cultivate my relationships in a healthier manner. And I always think the worst of situations, and I always think the worst in people. It allows me to look at things from a human perspective, because honestly, as humans, we're all going to F up in some sort of way. There's going to be something that chips the perfection idea and the gleam in how we view somebody. There's always going to be something that shows us how real things really are, right? So catastrophizing puts an emphasis on perfection. Perfection does not exist. So when you catastrophize, you're only amplifying an unreal expectation of yourself and others and situations. You can't do that. And I think one of the last things that I'm going to say is on how to break the cycle of catastrophizing is seeking support. My friends, my family, therapy has always been such a staple for me. More so emphasis on my friendships, because they really, really resonate deep within me, and I cherish my friendships a lot. But seeking support in people that know you, and they know how you can be, and they know how your thought processes can work, and being able to say, all right, Jazz, hold on, pump the brakes a little bit. Like, you don't think of it that way. That was so important to me, because when you don't have a circle around you that's able to identify catastrophic ways that you have, that's able to see like, you catastrophizing, you getting a little too negative, you thinking a little, that's not able to tell you to slow down just a little. I understand where you're coming from, and I'm validating your feelings, but also I need you to know that feelings are not facts. Me being able to have people around me that were able to do that was so important. And if you don't have a community like that, that's personally for me why I think therapy was such a vital component for my growth, because like I said earlier, it allowed me to see and hear the voice within myself the more that I had sessions. So seeking support is always such a great step in breaking the cycle of catastrophizing. I want you to be able to embrace the uncertainty of life and of the unknown, because a lot of your catastrophizing can be in the fact that you are unsure about a lot of things. You don't know which way to go, and you think that because it's either this or that there cannot be any room for much of anything else. There cannot be any gray area, because I'm uncertain of what I'm going to find within that gray area. Being able to embrace the uncertainty helps with that. Acknowledge that life is full of uncertainties. It isn't perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be room for flexibility in any decision, in any action, in any relationship. There's always going to be things that can be up for discussion, things that may not go according to plan, but may not look exactly as far left as you think there is, or as you think it is. There is always going to be room for that. Focus on what you can control rather than focusing on the uncontrollable. There are things in our life that we are not going to be able to handle the outcome. And that's why I said, don't worry about tomorrow, because that's uncontrollable. I don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. I can't control that. But right now, what's in front of me right now, the actions that I take, the conversations I have, the people that I interact with, this is my controllable. And even that's to a certain extent. So focus on what you can control and let the rest come and go as it will. All the chips will fall how they are supposed to, because I believe that God is going to do that for me regardless. So as far as you're concerned, be able to be flexible, be able to be adaptable, because that is going to be important in shifting those catastrophic thoughts from catastrophic to being able to look and live within the gray. I'm learning the importance of the gray area, and not because, you can never be sure of a certain decision. Because you're not able to, be definite. I'm learning to live in the gray, because I know that in the gray, there is room for growth. I realize that in the gray, it doesn't have to be a yes or a no. I am learning to live in the gray because I'm realizing that when your thought processes haven't fully developed yet and you're not fully capable of being sure in your actions and how you feel, sometimes that far left or far right can be a little bit too rooted in perfection. I'm learning to live in the gray, because in the gray is where I discover whether or not I am making catastrophic thoughts and decisions. I'm able to relax a little bit and be a little bit more flexible with the way that I think, being able to be a little bit more reasonable with the way that I feel. That is what living in the gray for me is right now. So I'm wrapping this up to say, if you are somebody that lives within catastrophic thinking, that has, from listening to this episode, has realized that you do have catastrophic thoughts, I want you to remember to live within the gray. Know that catastrophic thoughts can only hinder your ability to grow, to develop into the better version of you. To rewrite your narrative, catastrophic thinking has to stop. There's no way to rewrite a narrative without going too far to the left. If you have catastrophic thoughts, you just have to be able to stop yourself when you feel like your thinking is a little too negative. And it's going to be a journey. It's going to be something that takes time, and making sure that you follow those steps that I said about how to break that cycle will be pertinent. It will be very vital to your growth. So in saying that, I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of Her Revision podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine. As always, don't forget to please go and follow our Instagram page, Her Revision podcast, where I am sharing inspirational quotes. I'm sharing tidbits of motivational content, whether from the podcast or just flyby content that I myself do. Go ahead and support the podcast Instagram, as well as follow me on TikTok if you want to, Jasmine Lachey 0105. And also, if you're watching me on YouTube, hello. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're listening to me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate the podcast 5 stars if you will. And as always, I love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting and watching. Until next time, bye.